What's going on, guys? We're just waiting for Cooper Hopkins to get in here. I'm going to get started probably about 3 or 4 minutes here right on the dot. All right, what's going on, everybody? John here with you. It is a Thursday, July 13th, 2023. How's everybody doing out there today? Once we get Cooper Hopkins in here and he joins in, we will officially get started with the show, and I will get the recorder and everything all squared away. So probably squared away at least in 2 or 3 minutes here on this side. So there's a lot to do. And the way that I have this set up this year, we're still going to talk about all the moves and get all that stuff out of the way. But I have it separated into 3 parts. One's going to be storylines, the opening of free agency frenzy, and the standings and predictions at the end of the year, where we had the fun game where I ask you to give me a team that didn't make the playoffs last year that you think that could, and a team that did make the playoffs this year that probably isn't going to. So we're going to have that in there, and I will also have a couple of surprises there along the way as far as everything else. So once he gets in here, we'll get all this stuff started. I don't want to jump the gun here because there is a lot to get to. I think the run time is going to be in between about 90 to 100 minutes. That's what I'm planning on. Some of the things that we talk about might go a little bit over because I have a lot to say about it, and I don't want to take away any of the time from Cooper and I in regards to some of these topics because there are some heavy hitters. So we're essentially, once we do get started here, going to go through every single team for the most part. There'll be a couple teams that do not have as many moves that we will kind of glance through quickly. There'll be some talking points for us to stop on at least several times throughout these notes, kind of like it was last year, but this should be a lot more organized as far as storylines and topics and everything else to get into. All right, so we got the invitational squared away. He's going to be joining in here shortly. So got the notes and everything else all prepared. Got all the stuff centered for probably like the last couple of weeks or so on that end. There's been a lot to get to, so we're going to try to get through all of this here today. You won't get at least the first 10 minutes of this as far as the Spotify side because we're going to be going right into the start and right into the moves. I just wanted to get a little bit of a jump on just in case. All right. All right, I see Cooper Hopkins has joined us here. So this is going to be our NHL Free Agency Frenzy 2023 edition with Cooper Hopkins and myself. This will be the second year that we've done this, my friend, and I kind of organized this just a tad differently this year. Try to go with a little bit of storylines, the opening of Free Agency Frenzy, and standings and predictions. But first of all, my friend, how are you doing?
As always, this is the first thing I lead with every time we jump on the mic, John. It's fantastic to hear your voice. Kind of you to ask. It's been a wild world for me a little bit here in Los Angeles, where it's certainly the NHL offseason because we hit 90 degrees today, and it's supposed to stay that way for a couple of weeks. They say there's a heat dome over the city, so whatever that means, take from it what you will. But I'm doing well, my friend, and this has been a long time coming. It seems like the season ended many, many months ago. In reality, it wasn't all that long ago. We were still watching the Knights and the Panthers go toe-to-toe. And so I'll send the question right back to you, pal. How are you doing in Michigan, my friend?
I'm doing well. It's heating up here. And thankfully, honestly, we'll just say this. I'm thankful that the Canadian wildfires have gotten away from Michigan a little bit. It's just a bunch of smog and nasty outside, so I actually can breathe some fresh air for once.
Yeah, I don't blame you for squinting, holding down your thoughts and saying, okay, let's just wait it out until this smoke clears. I'm glad that it has. I know that was no fun. So we're here. I have nothing to complain about because it may be hot, but the sky is blue. The air is clear, well, relatively speaking, in LA. But here we are. We finally linked up, and I know there is lots and lots to talk about. And before we jump in, I will just say I probably said something like this last year. For anyone listening to this, I wish you could see what I'm looking at right now. John Ott, in so many ways, the consummate professional. His notes for this show that we're about to put on, comprehensive, lengthy, detailed. He's got narratives for you. We got this whole thing set up, and it's all courtesy of the big brain of John Ott. So, John, true tip of the cap to you as we get started here.
I appreciate that. I hope everything is not too crazy, but I try to keep everything organized here. So let's start with a huge splash. And again, this is before the agency window opens here. So small lead-ins for me. So Tobias Bornfot, the 22-year-old defenseman, he gets the 2-year league minimum. As the Kings continue to try to move around the cap, they get Cam Talbot, who might have to actually start, and Trevor Lewis for cheap. Arizona Coyotes, they picked up Sean Dursey from the LA Kings for a second-round pick in 2024. But the other small lead-in, but this shouldn't be quite so small. Anze Kopitar, the 35-year-old captain, played all 82 games, played 74 points, a plus 20. He gets a 2-year extension at $14 million per. That's solid because it's 7 until 2026. But here's the gigantic uppercut. And we were kind of waiting for this, Cooper, on this end. Pierre-Luc Dubois is now a member of the LA Kings. Is a centerman, 25 years old, an 8-year extension, $64 million, 8.5 until 2031. His stats, 63 points in 73 games, 27 goals, 36 assists. But the Winnipeg Jets, boy, did they get a haul in return. Alex Iafallo, Gabe Vigliardi, Rasmus Kupari, and a second-round pick in 2024. I just got to come right out and ask you, my friend, is this too much for GM Rob Blake to give up?
You know what? I'm going to give you a one-word answer, and that answer is yes. I think that Dubois is going to level up in his career. Listen, he's already been a major contributor. PLD, when interviewed in one of several interviews that have covered his transition to Los Angeles, he stated something to the effect of, I can finally be myself as a member of the Kings. So we'll see what that exactly means, and if he expands upon the definition of what it means to be himself. But, you would read into that and say, okay, he felt stifled potentially as an individual, and then also potentially as a hockey player in the style of game that he was being asked to play in Winnipeg. So all the best to him. But back to the main point of your question, those names going to Winnipeg, I think that, of course, and we know what Winnipeg did, right? Bubble team as we push toward the playoffs, just beat out the Calgary Flames as we got to the end of the regular season. Winnipeg then fizzled out very quickly. Of course, really thanks to their first-round opponent. But I think the types of players that they got from LA are going to help move them forward, and they might find a little more success this upcoming season.
I mean, look at it. We talked about the names. They're not small. I followed 29, 36 points. Villiardi, he had a breakout year. This is his second season, 23, 41 points. Kupari is more of the prospect side. He had 15 points in 66 games and a second round pick. And again, as we talked about, being yourself or what you're thinking about. So we're talking about maybe giving up too much. Well, think about it again, as we've talked about. Pierre-Luc Dubois, this is his second team in about 3 seasons or so. He's trying to find a way to fit in. Look, we're not going to tell you that Pierre-Luc Dubois isn't supremely talented. He can be a top-line two-way centerman, but that is a lot for the LA Kings to give up, in my opinion, because I always thought of them as a team the last couple of years that can do some damage. And for Winnipeg, essentially, this tells me, Cooper, they're not just trying to rebuild; they're doing the rebuild on the fly, and they got a good haul from it.
Yeah, I think they're willing to make that exchange, right? Where you have someone who has such a high ceiling in terms of their talent, Pierre-Luc Dubois, but is not necessarily reaching that potential, in part because of his mental state, right? He just didn't feel like he fit in with that squad. Obviously, was vocal about wanting to make a transition. Okay, well, your wishes are command, say the Jets, and they got a big haul in return. Of course, I love what Villardi's doing. Kupari, a contributor as well. But Iafallo just felt like it came to me. You know, I know it's tough to quantify. You know, we want to look at the numbers and talk about, kind of actual hard stats. But there's just something about Alex Iafallo not being on the Los Angeles Kings. It really makes me scratch my head. We're going to have to see if that hole is filled for the men in black and silver here in this coming season.
So Blake Wheeler, that was about. He went to the New York Rangers. We'll talk more about that in a little bit when we get to it. Mark Scheifele, they're still trying to figure that out. Connor Hellebuck, another huge piece. The goaltender is due a lot of money. So Kevin Shovel-Dayov's got a lot of work to do on that side. And then after the trade was made, the Winnipeg Jets made some small moves. Vlad Nemestikov, 2 years, $4 million, about 25 points in 77 games. Dylan Sandberg, the defenseman, 8 points, 2 years, 2.8. Laurent Brossoit goes back to where he used to back up Connor Hellebuck because he's a member of the Winnipeg Jets. He still wants to try to win a cup over there, as he says, and Colin Dilly will be the backup for that side for the AHL side, 1 year in the league minimum. So all that might come into play, and who knows, if we find something that happens with Connor Hellebuck, whether it's the trade deadline for the upcoming season or wherever else, you might see Laurent Brossoit play some main minutes in net.
Yeah, the two names that really stand out in that list. I love what they chose to do with Nemesnikov in particular, and I really like the Brossoit choice. Not a ton of sample size necessarily, but look, no one's going to shake a stick at a 927 goals against average, and he knows the system. I think, as you just said, John, he expressed his desire to be in Winnipeg. And look, there are a couple of Canadian franchises where that's not always the case for players who have choices. Obviously, we will discuss the Calgary Flames later and about whether or not players actually want to go play in Central Alberta. But it's nice to see a goaltender say, hey, I want to return to Winnipeg and try to make an impact there. And that's what Brossoit's doing.
So there was a doozy in there between us. That was our first topic in between the Kings and the Jets. But now let's go to another team that we've known quite well over the last couple of years since Cooper and I have been doing some of these games. The Colorado Avalanche, and the way that I entitled this was Navigating Waters to Remain a Force. And I think that's where they are right now because that's what you have to do. Tampa's gone through it as well. So I've already had to make an update in these notes, especially from today. It just never ends. Colorado Avalanche require forward Ryan Johansson from the Nashville Predators for Alex Galchenyuk, but that does not go through. 12 days after signing with Arizona, contract terminated detrimental to the team. So the 50% retention for Johansson stays. It's 2 years of $4 million. Colorado wasn't done, though. They sent young forward Alex Newhook. The terms were undisclosed to the Montreal Canadiens, but he got his extension on that side for Montreal. Giovanni Fairbrother, first and second round picks that were already exercised in 2023. And maybe with Johansson, you think he comes expendable. But it's interesting. 30 points, 14 goals, 16 assists. He played the entire season. And we talked about some of the injuries. And unfortunately, again, for Gabriel Landeskog, the captain, he's going to miss all of next season as well. So 2 straight years with the knee injury. But Newhook was put in a situation, Cooper, where he was going to be solidly in the top 6. And all Joe Sakic wanted was to see the young forward at 22 break out. He didn't. So they moved on from him.
Yeah, and John, I'm stumbling my way into a theme here as we move on to the Colorado Avalanche. I feel similarly about Alex Newhook as I did about Iafallo. Something about Newhook just said Colorado Avalanche to me. He seemed to fit in with the system. He was relied upon at a young age. From everything that I could read on the ice, he had great rapport with his teammates, and I think that is a big pickup for the Canadiens. I didn't necessarily expect him to land there, but I think that the Canadiens are getting a win in bringing in a young forward who I think is going to be a fixture on the Montreal top six for years to come.
There's a lot still left to do here with Colorado, so we'll continue to get into it. Ross Colton from Tampa Bay, for second-round pick. He had 81 games played, 16 goals, 16 assists, 32 points. That was a second-round pick that was already used in this draft. The deal's for 2 years, $2.25 million. So Ross Colton goes to Colorado, but again, they're not done. Miles Wood from New Jersey to Colorado, the 27-year-old, 76 games played, 13 goals, 14 assists, 27 points. He hit just 30 points once in his career, and it's a heavy minus player if you believe in that, a minus 63. But the reason I bring that up, 6 years, $15 million. So you have to deal with the long-term service, but again, he's only 27. But at 6 years, $15 million, it doesn't seem like much of a risk. So I can understand why the move was made as the team's up against the cap. We'll talk about JT Compher in a little bit as well. But there had to be some improvement in that bottom six production, Cooper, because we talked about it, even from the playoff side of it. Whether it was Nathan McKinnon, Kel McCarr, Lehkonen, Nichushkin, who wasn't even there because of some of the stuff that was going on during the playoffs that were kind of on the hush-hush. There just was another complimentary scoring for Colorado, and they're really trying to do their best to change that.
Yeah, and John, I'm glad that you talked about the bottom six because I think all we have to do is look not too far away in the Western Conference to a team that is very top-heavy, and that team is the Edmonton Oilers. I'm not saying that the Avalanche and their management are making direct comparisons to, a potential situation that they could find themselves in, an undesirable one at that. And listen, the Oilers are making the playoffs. They have two of the best forwards ever to play the game in Draisaitl and McDavid, but you don't want to get too top-heavy. And so I do think that they're, of course, losing a little bit. I think they take a little bit of an L with that Newhook exit, but bringing in a couple of players who, yes, I like that you pointed out the minus, right? So a minus 76 is not great for Miles Wood, but I do like Ross Colton. He's been on Tampa Bay, which has had similar success. Of course, he faced the Colorado Avalanche just a couple of years ago in that Stanley Cup final, and they bring him into the fold. That's going to do a real good for them, I think, in balancing out their forward lineups.
Yes, it is. I want to bring up some big and some small signings, but then we have a big point before we move on. So the Avalanche brought back in one-year deals, in or out. Jonathan Drouin, Andrew Cogliano, Jack Johnson, but most importantly, saved themselves enough money to sign Bowen Byram. The 22-year-old superstar just got to stay healthy. 2 years, $7.7 million, about $3.85 until 2025. Again, that's what you need. Gabe Landeskog, as you mentioned, still out. But here's the big one for me, Cooper, and we need to talk about this because I need to get your thoughts. So team exits. This is just from the Stanley Cup that we covered a couple of years ago. This is who's away from the team. Andre Burakovsky, JT Compher, Darren Helm, Tyson Yost, Nazem Kadri, Gabe Landeskog because of the IR. Ryan Murray, Alex Newhook, Evan Rodriguez, Dennis Mulligan, Matt Nieto, Eric Johnson, Alex Galchenyuk, Nico Sturm, and Darcy Kemper. Their ads have been Wood, Tufte, Ryan Johansson, Colton, Freddie Olofsson, and Olason from the Sweden side. But all of those losses, when we go back into it, I know you and I said at the forefront when the Colorado Avalanche lifted it. I thought you said it right. Colorado's probably not going back-to-back, but you think they will win one because you have McKinnon, who's just 27, and Makar, 24. We know that it was going to get more challenging. As I mentioned, Tampa Bay's got to go through this, but are you still believing that the Colorado Avalanche can still get a cup here at some point in the next few years? Because that's a lot of losses.
Yeah, I mean, John, I'm literally looking at the list in the document that you prepared right now, and man, it's neither of us are Avalanche fans necessarily. We like the team and like the way the organization is run. We respect what they've done and what they've accomplished. But man, oh man, it is eye-opening to see these names. I mean, we're about Burakovsky making an impact in Seattle. We're going to talk about Compher, Helm, a veteran leader. Nazem Kadri, now one of the de facto faces of the franchise, the Flames. Newhook, now we just spoke about him. Evan Rodriguez, very, very skilled and getting better. Matt Nieto, I think you could say the same thing. And This is a long, long list, John. So let me try to answer your question. I don't want to cop out completely, but I will say it is going to be tougher for me. Last year, I don't think either of us had much hesitation saying we believe in the Colorado Avalanche's ability to compete for a cup at an elite level. I think that they can still maybe I'm splitting hairs. I think they can still compete for the Stanley Cup. I'm not sure if it's going to be at the same level we saw last year.
I find it very hard to believe, just in case. That's why I threw that list out there. I'm right there with you. I mean, essentially, you're talking about top six, bottom six, top six, bottom six parts of defense all gone, goaltending gone with Darcy Kemper. I understand what Georgiev can do, but that is a hell of a lot of depth. And again, that's just over 2 seasons. So we will see how the Colorado Avalanche fare, because I do think the Dallas Stars are coming. So this next part of this document will be the Blackhawks and the Bruins a little bit. So the Blackhawks reshaped their team for Bedard in the President's Trophy Curse Bruins edition. That's how I have this labeled. So Boston Bruins, they got the rights and they signed restricted free agents Alec Regula and Ian Mitchell from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Taylor Hall. He gets a 2 years, $12 million, $6 million per until 2025. Again, Taylor Hall, his numbers look down for the 31-year-old for 36 points, 16 goals, 20 assists, plus 11. But I remind you that the Boston Bruins were the best regular season team ever in the NHL, and they were so good he got to sit on the third line. So again, Regula and Mitchell for Hall and Nick Foligno. He got signed as well. 60 games played, 26 points, plus 18 for 1 year, $4 million. I would imagine, again, Hall's going to have his numbers come up back on the first line side. Corresponding move had the Tampa Bay Lightning pick up a seventh. The Chicago Blackhawks get Corey Perry. I know it sounds like a lot of money, 1 year, $4 million on that side, but they do have to get to the cap floor. Blackhawks also signed Ryan Donato, 27 from Seattle, 2 years, $4 million, 2 per until 2025, 27 points in 71 games played, and a plus 16. So the Chicago Blackhawks look a lot different here, Cooper, and you might see Taylor Hall and Connor Bedard on line numero uno.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually really like the Blackhawks picking up Taylor Hall. I know he's bounced around the league a little bit now. I think it's safe to say that. And he's contributed everywhere he's gone, John. I mean, we know that he's been I think that second tier below kind of the superstar players in the league. But he has, even in a down year, still occupies that space. I think he commands that respect on the ice, which is what the Blackhawks need. I don't think, and listen, we don't have to belabor the point here about the Blackhawks' struggles as a franchise, but I think that the product on the ice, bouncing back with players like Hall, and we know the kind of game that Corey Perry plays, I think that's exactly what's needed in Chicago. So think about this, John. You have a goal scorer who has grit in Corey Perry, kind of a more true goal scorer, playmaker in Taylor Hall, who can lead a line, and then you have the best prospect who's now going to be an NHLer in decades. That's a pretty nice combination. Now, will they play together on the same line? Who knows? That would be a fun experiment. They might be up and down the lineup, but either way, every shift one or multiple of those players are on the ice, it's going to be must-see hockey.
And again, Alec, who's listening in there with us, again, I appreciate you, Mr. Nava, on that side. He might be covering the opener that's on October 10th, because it's going to be Sidney Crosby versus Connor Bedard. I think that's very well done there by the NHL, as we're about 87 days away from the season opener, if you can imagine that. But I do want to get into the Boston Bruins really quickly before we move on to Vegas. So I can't tell you for certain, but we all know what's up in the air for Cam Neely's squad on that side of the GM. Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci are expected to retire, but I do imagine that they still have aspirations of winning it all. But again, I threw this in the own notes, but I got to repeat it the same way. Can they still do so despite losing Taylor Hall, Foligno, Dmitry Orlov, and Tyler Bertuzzi? They still need to also sign goaltender Jeremy Swayman. Essentially what they did was 1 year deals, Milan Lucic, James Van Riemsdyk. I do love the Morgan Geekie move on that side, 2 years, $4 million. Again, 2 per 2025, 28 points in 69 games played. They also threw Kevin Shattenkirk in as well. But Cooper, a critical question here for me is the regular season Thanos losing power, and do you believe the Boston Bruins compete window? I'm not going to say they're not a playoff team, but as far as lifting a cup, do you think that's over?
Yeah, well, John, this is another good kind of running theme here, and where we can look at the Boston Bruins in not exactly a 100% similar light to the Avalanche, but something that reminds me of Colorado in the sense that we're losing a lot of names that have been major contributors on the Bruins for at least a solid period of time, right? And so one thing that gives me a little bit extra hope, at least there's room for hope for Colorado, is that they may, and I mean, I'm sure they're hoping so, run into fewer injury issues and off-ice issues this coming season, right? You would expect those kinds of X factors to balance out. The Bruins were a little healthier, but they're still losing names that, and listen, what can you do? Bergeron is a generational player. His type of game is almost irreplaceable. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. Krejci's contributions as well have been so well documented with the Bruins. That's going to be nigh impossible to just outright replace those kinds of impacts that they make. So I'm going to say a similar comment to what I said to the Avalanche. I think the Bruins making a great listen. That's Morgan Geekie is a sneaky move. I like that addition to the team. Van Riemsdyk as well. And listen, okay, Lucic, a little bit more of, I think, what we are going to see as a kind of a final lap, a little bit of a Derek Jeter kind of a retirement moment, and he has earned it. He played, the Flames fans, he was beloved by some and, frustrated others to no end. I lean a little bit more toward the positive. I think he was a great impact on the roster and the type of player who is getting fewer and further between in this league. I'm not sure if he's going to, necessarily lift the Bruins, buoy their chances of getting closer to a Stanley Cup. So, like I said with the Avalanche, I think they're still going to compete, watch them still be effective as a roster, but I'm stepping back from that kind of elite level, saying they're going to have more struggles this coming season.
I'm in complete agreement with you on that, so I had to make sure that we threw that out there. And it's kind of funny how you said in between Colorado and Boston, there's some themes. Now, this might seem small, but I want to go ahead and give Bill Foley and company McCrimmon, I'm going to give them an A+ for this cap and everything else that they've done during the trade deadline for Vegas. I know it's going to sound strange, but we'll go through it right now. So the Vegas Golden Knights, they send Riley Smith, a 32-year-old. He had 56 points in 78 games. He had 26 goals, 30 assists, plus 11 to the Pittsburgh Penguins for a third-round pick in 2024. Again, that doesn't sound like a lot, but you got to understand one thing. The key was zero salary retention for Vegas the other way, and that allowed them essentially to sign a younger version of Riley Smith, who we really liked, Cooper, during the playoffs especially. Ivan Barbashev, 27 years old, 5 years, $25 million. Again, 18 points in 22 games of the playoffs in the Stanley Cup campaign. He played all 82 in the regular season, 16 goals, 29 assists, 45 points. And again, this is a move that everybody knew that was coming. You assumed that Adin Hill was going to get about $5 million per. Well, it's a just under $10 million contract. The 27-year-old journeyman from the Sharks and the Coyotes and everything else, 16 games played, 11-4, 217, 932, 2 shutouts just in the postseason, 16-7-0 in the regular season with 250, 915 in the regular season with 27 games played. Again, I have to give Bill Foley and Kelly McCrimmon an A+. I expect them to remain silent the rest of the way, in which they have. But we do know the salary cap's going to be going up over the next couple of years. They have about $9 million in cap space right now. And there are some big-time free agents that are left to go. I want to just make one other mention, and we'll let Cooper get his thoughts in there. They do need probably Robin Leonard to stay on the LTIR with the double hip surgery. And we knew Brossoit and Quick are going to be gone. So you would expect that Vegas doesn't have to run 5 goaltenders and go through the myriad of injuries. The only player they're really going to lose on their roster at the start of October is Brett Howden. But to go from Riley Smith to Ivan Barbashev and get Adin Hill signed, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I can't think of anything bad.
Yeah, John, it's right here. You gave him the grade A+. I'm going to double down on that. And look, if Barbashev wanted an extra year on that, if he wanted 6, I would have given it to him.
Yeah.
Like you said, you stole the thought right out of my brain. Did anyone who had eyeballs and watched the Stanley Cup playoffs, Ivan Barbashev was a monster. He was excellent. And I expect him to only get better. He's right at that age where he's going to start peaking, that 27 to 29 age. He's on the front end of that right now. 5 years at 25, I think is actually a pretty great rate, I should say.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that he's going to be a major contributor in Vegas and become one of their leaders, as he's already, showing himself to be. Of course, you'd love to keep Riley Smith. He's not all that old, still 32, right, as you pointed out, and great production. But yeah, Barbashev was the priority. They showed that. Of course, Eden Hill, absolutely. Got to keep him in the fold. He stepped into the blue paint, gets you a Stanley Cup. What more do you want? That's the ultimate prize. So, fully McCrimmon, A+, no question about it. And we will have to keep an eye on that Robin Lehner situation. But even if there is a wrinkle with that, they still did a great job with their work so far.
Yeah, I think so. So this is going to be a smaller topic before we get into a huge one in the New Jersey Devils. But I do want to hit on the Flyers for a minute. So there's some small signings. Garnet Hathaway, 2 years, $4.75 million, 2.38 until 2025. He had 22 points in 84 games played. Yes, that is correct. He played a couple extra games this year on that side in between Washington and Boston. They get Mark Stahl from Florida for 1 year, $1.1 million. On the other side, they do re-sign Cam York. He gets a 2-year extension from the back end at 3.2, 1.6 until 2025. He had 20 points, 54 games played for the defenseman, and Noah Cates. He got a pretty good deal, 2 years, $5.25 million, 82 games played, 38 points, 2.625 until 2025. We know that the rebuild hasn't started yet, but I want to go to the main point here. So when you talk about the Flyers and their 5th pick here, Cooper, with Matija Michkov on that side, he was expected to be another one of those. And again, I'm not predicting it. I don't do the NHL draft boards, but I heard the name Alex Ovechkin thrown out a lot for this kid on that side. And if it wasn't for guys like Connor Bedard, he could have gone first. The reason why Philadelphia was able to draft them 5 probably is because they're going to have to wait 3 years for his Russian deal in the KHL to expire. So they were able to get Kevin Hayes away from the buyout. That's $3.6 million. That's going to go up against the cap, and they had to make some small moves. But I know it's going to take a long time for the Flyers, but I really don't blame them, Cooper, for taking Michkov here, even though you got to wait 3 years, because it's probably going to be 3 years before they can even get started.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm sure they did their due diligence in trying to time out where they want to be 3 years from now. Looked at Michkov and said, okay, let's keep an eye on who's going to go in front of him in the draft. But this is a phrase we hear a lot across the major sports with the big drafts, John, and that is the best available player.
Yeah.
They obviously had him identified as that. I actually agree with that assessment. It's a bit of a tough pill to swallow with a KHL deal that has to expire, as you pointed out. But when that does, I think that he is going to be able to basically merge into the freeway, so to speak, as the Flyers are going to pick up some momentum, you would think, over the next couple of seasons, and Michkov could step right in and be a major contributor.
Yes, he can, and we're going to have to see. Danny Briere and everybody else is going to have a lot of work to do on that end. We're going to shift into a huge topic here before we let Cooper take the floor with the Calgary Flames. We won't have probably as much with the Flames this year in comparison to last year in some of those moves, but I don't want to slight any of the time because we got plenty of it. For the New Jersey Devils, I titled it as a new power in the East because I want to have this conversation. So small lead in. Nathan Bastian, forward, 25 years old, 2 years, $2.7 million. Again, 1.35 till 2025. They signed Michael McLeod as well for 1 year. Backup Eric Shelgren from the Toronto Maple Leafs goes to the New Jersey Devils. He might get some AHL time on that side because you still have Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid. They were dominant, especially Schmid. We saw him in the playoffs. They do get Colin Miller from Dallas. He had 6 goals, 15 assists, 21 points for a 5th-round pick in 2025. But let's get into some big hitters here. Jesper Bratt, 24 years old, 8 years, $63 million deal, 8.75 due until 2031. But he had a fantastic year. All 82 games played, 32 goals, 41 assists, 73 points, plus 14. Eric Haula for a 3-year deal from the Boston Bruins on that side. They lose that. And, they picked him up from the trade last year. They extend Haula. So 3 years, 9.45, 3.15 to 2026, 41 points in 80 games played. Timo Meier gets a big deal. And I'm not saying it's the wrong one, but we'll have a conversation about that. 8 years, $70.4 million, 8.8 to 2031. He carries a team high cap hit, 10.5%. Numbers were 14 points, and he was even in the plus minus in 21 games in New Jersey. on the season. And between the Sharks and the Devils, 78 games played, 40 goals, 26 assists, 66 points, minus 19. In the postseason with New Jersey, however, 11 games played, 4 points, minus 1. I think Timo Meier's a great player here, Cooper, but I just don't know if Fitzgerald saw enough, Tom Fitzgerald, the GM, to be able to make that move. But I really believe with the stuff that we see in front of us, they think their window is right now. And I got to ask you a critical question. Do you think the New Jersey Devils are a top 5 team in this league, or is it more or less?
Oh, you know what? I'm not going to say they're a top 5 team in the league. I will give them top 10. And you know what? Part of that, part of the confidence in saying that is I actually love the additions of Jesper Bratt and Eric Howland. I mean, it seems easy to say because you've got them right here in the notes, but those numbers are hard to deny. Jesper Bratt in particular, I think he's going to make a big impact right away. And, you know, yeah, that's a bit of a pricey deal, but I like that choice. I agree with you, John. I see where the needle is pointing for you with Timo Meier. Mine is pointed in exactly the same direction. Obviously, Meier, one of the kind of upper tier forwards. We talked about that with Taylor Hall a little bit, right? We're not a full-fledged superstar, but somebody who can make a real a significant impact in the goals and assists columns for sure. Timo Meier is going to do that. Can he sustain it? Well, we'll see, right? He's 26. Going to continue to improve for at least a couple, for 3-4 years maybe, before we see him kind of peak. So that, I think, is what New Jersey is paying for. But, you know, it is still a hypothetical, and it doesn't necessarily make me think, all right, they have pushed themselves, you know, beyond the threshold where now they are going to be a problem night in and night out. Yeah, they have a lot of talent, but I don't think that they have separated themselves necessarily and put them in the top of the NHL.
Yeah, maybe they're going to be in the situation where maybe the Rangers have fallen off a little bit, so they'll go up just because of that. I'm still kind of in the camp that you are. I'm still a little hesitant on Timo Meier. Look, I'm not saying he's not a fantastic player, but again, you make that money, you're going to put in a situation where they're going to expect you to produce. But also, if you're Timo Meier, you're on a much better squad that is deep all the way across the board. I mean, look, we weren't even talking about New Jersey last year as far as what they could do. They absolutely exploded, but now it's about the staying power, and we'll see if they can do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, with my comments, the last thing I'll say on the Devils, I want to see Meier make an impact in New Jersey. I think it's exciting. We're going to talk about the Rangers in a minute. I love that there are increasing intensity and skills and potential building around both the Devils and the Rangers. Now, the Rangers are a little further along on that road, and we're going to talk about, you know, have they sort of peaked? I don't want to give everything away, but it's interesting what's developing in the tri-state area between the Devils and their rival.
Yeah, all the teams in New York, with the Islanders as well, they're all kind of fighting for that same spot. So I want to talk about this with the Calgary Flames. It is a new direction under Craig Conroy, and Jerome McGinley does return. I won't talk about the small moves with Dryden Hunt and Jordan Osterley. I know him from the Red Wings side on that end, but I do want to start with this. Michael Stone does retire, but he's going to stay in the player development role. He had 6 seasons with Arizona for the defenseman, 324 games played, 7 seasons with Calgary, 228 games played, 552 games played in his career, 41 goals, 105 assists, 145 points. But from what I know in the time that we've spent here, Cooper, covering this team, an absolute bomb of a shot and a class human being. I think the player development role is going to be pretty good. If you're going to have me develop some of my defensemen to learn that shot, I'm all for it.
Yeah. You know, we've obviously done a lot of Calgary Flames coverage, John, and you became familiar with old number 26, Michael Stone, who was sort of the 7th defenseman, and then depending on availability, you know, we've talked about Oliver Shillington, who missed all of last season due to personal issues. That kind of bumped Stone up into that number 6 role, and kind of always occupied a space on that third pairing of blue liners for the Flames. And boy, am I glad that he was a Calgary Flame. He was a joy to watch. Obviously, the brother of Mark Stone, Stanley Cup champion, and kind of in his shadow a little bit, but you know, there's that hometown feel, even though that Stone played about half of his career, the latter half, of course, in Calgary. It was bittersweet to see that he was retiring I guess about a month ago now. He made the announcement. And really all you have to do in this day and age, John, is just look at the comments, right, on an Instagram post from the team. When every comment is positive about Michael Stone, nobody's saying, oh, great, good riddance, or finally a roster spot opened up. Nope, they're saying that about other roster players, but not Michael Stone. He was a special player and worked really hard to retain his place in the league and did a great job in doing so.
Yeah, I loved what he always brought when he filled in. He knew what you were going to get from Stone, and it was always going to be consistent. And I'm sure he was very loved by all of his teammates from everything else that you talked about. I do want to again talk about something that's pretty difficult. I imagine it's more difficult on your side, but even for me, because I love this play, I was a little bit gutted as well. So the Flames, they trade Tyler Toffoli to the Jersey Devils for Igor Sharangovich and a third-round pick that was exercised. So Sharangovich, he does sign a 2-year, $6.2 million deal for the Flames, 3.1 until 2026. But again, I mentioned this early. I know you were right back with this on with me. 82 games played, 34 goals, 39 assists, 73 points for Teapot, plus 16. He's got 4.25 left on his contract until the season ends for the Devils on that end. And again, Sharangovich, 25 years of age. He scores a goal about every 4 games in his career. For his career, 205 games played, 106 points, minus 21, but he has 53 goals, 53 assists. I know that he's going to be pretty good. Conroy loves his shot, and we wonder if he's going to play with Huberdeau, Kadri. We'll figure all that out there. But at the end of it, when I see Tyler Toffoli go and the return on that end, whether or not Sharangovich turns out to be the player that you think he's going to be, I still see Teapot go the other way, and I say, damn, Cooper, because this guy was an MVP for the Flames last year, and that couldn't have been fun.
Yeah, and a couple of thoughts here, and I'll try to be brief on Toffoli. I know we have a lot to get to. You know what, Toffoli, John, as you have stated in games we covered and just seconds ago, and we both agree, yeah, Toffoli was, if not the outright MVP, certainly one of the MVPs of the Flames last year. And you know what? It was because he had to be. He had to be. There were players that were the obvious MVPs in years prior, one of whom played for a Stanley Cup with Florida, and the other who is, basically the default best player on the Columbus Blue Jackets. And Toffoli had to step up. He did a pretty dang decent job doing so. And I think part of the reason why he's no longer a Calgary Flame, John, is the fact that he was a pretty outspoken Daryl Sutter guy. He wasn't an apologist. He did, never made a claim, oh, Daryl makes no mistakes. Certainly not. But they had the history from their time together, winning multiple Stanley Cups with the LA Kings. And I think with the tenure of Daryl Sutter ending, his second tenure with the Flames coming to a close, I think that just coincided with it being the right time for Tyler to move on and find another place to make an impact. And I didn't want to give it away. I know we just talked about the Devils, but I do think that Tyler Toffoli is kind of like Geeky that we talked about earlier. I think Toffoli is going to be a really kind of semi-sneaky ad for New Jersey. I think Toffoli was a little bit hidden in Calgary during his time there, and I think he'll be able to step up with the Devils and make a real solid impact. He was not someone that I expected to ever be a Calgary Flame, and now that he's gone, as the saying goes, we don't know what we got, right, until. And I'm glad that he was a Flame. He was a joy to watch and a hard worker. Had just some highlight reel goals that I will remember for a long time. A great Flame for sure.
Again, 34 goals, 39 assists, 73 points for a guy that they didn't think was going to be on the first line. That's about as good as it gets. I don't care what anyone says on that end. And I'll just throw this out there quickly. In between Jacob Pelche, Cole Schwint, Walker Dewar, Matthew Phillips now with Washington. But goaltender Dustin Wolf, you might get one more year for Markstrom and Vladar, but you might start seeing more of the kids start to play consistently for Calgary as they're heading into a new direction.
Yeah, and so we'll wrap up the Flames by just saying, first of all, as much as we just talked about Tyler Toffoli, kind of a major name, in terms of trade moves, he was not. Sharangovich, certainly not. I agree with you. I think that's too little in return for a player like Toffoli. But that move not only made because of the Daryl Sutter change, I think, but also just flat out the Flames are trying to get younger. So that's one factor as well. And you just listed a couple of young players, several young players, in fact, for the Flames that are going to be expected to do more than just pop into the lineup every several games or so. A lot of fans, myself included, don't love the loss of Matthew Phillips. He was the leading scorer in the American Hockey League. He is now a Washington Capital. That is a tough pill to swallow for sure. But really love what Peltier can bring. Walker Duehr definitely showed his value. I think he needs to be a little more consistent, but of course this previous season was his first real, NHL time. And then Dustin Wolf, the chosen one.
Yes.
Award-winning elite goaltender, just a league below the NHL and looks to be ready to go. Now that question is not an if, but when, right? As you just said, John. So Dustin Wolf is going to get his shot in a major way. I'm not sure he'll be thrust into the starter's role. It would be interesting to see what happens with Vladar, who's a goaltender I still like. You and I don't love him necessarily. He had the opportunity to take that lead spot from Markstrom when Markstrom was really struggling, and Vladar never really grabbed it by the reins. So I think that's something we're going to have to watch in Calgary with a lot of other things, but definitely look out because Dustin Wolf is coming for sure.
Absolutely. So these ones will be quick and easy to do because there isn't a lot of moves here. For the St. Louis Blues, the only thing they're trying to do right now is get rid of Torrey Krug and the $6.5 million cap hit till 2027 for the defenseman. They do bring back Oscar Sundqvist for 1 year. Ken Howard and the Edmonton Oilers, they're pretty much stuck for cap. So again, it's a conversation with McDavid and Draisaitl, and can they do it with their offense alone? Because nothing's happening on that end. Montreal Canadiens, we mentioned with Alex Newhook, the 22-year-old 4-year extension, $11.6 million, 2.9 till 2027. We both like that move on that side. I am rooting for one thing, and I do just want to mention this very quickly before we go into the window here. David Reinbacher, the defenseman, the 5th overall pick that was booed right on the board when Carey Price introduced him on that side. Did not love to see it, but he did get his 3-year entry-level contract signed at $2.85, and outside the cap hit, he's got $6.35 in endorsements, so he's getting paid. So whether or not the fans want him to be here, I hope he does well because I believe Martin St. Louis is a pretty good coach for all things considered.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Once upon a time, Martin St. Louis, a Calgary Flame, of course, shoved it down the Flames' throats in 2004 along with Vinny Cavalier at the Tampa Bay Lightning and took home the cup. But he was a heck of a player, diminutive guy, but a big presence, and I think that has carried over to his coaching style and career. Like that he is still bench boss. And yeah, that Reinbacher situation, I think that's classic stuff for a player who's going to have a chip on his shoulder, and now I think he's going to have even more to prove. When you get booed like that, you're just a kid. It's like, hey, man, I've worked myself into this position.
Yes.
Give me a chance. Carey Price, come on, man, just read the card, read the teleprompter. It's the least you can do. But you know what? That actually might put a little extra fire under his rear end to move his career forward. I'm with you on that, John.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I'd like to see it. So now the window open and we'll start to go in order here. So Leo Carlsson for the Anaheim Ducks, a 2nd overall pick. Didn't know he was going to be that one. It could have been Adam Fantilli. He signs his entry-level deal with some big bombs for Pat Verbeek, the former assistant GM for the Detroit Red Wings. Alex Killorn from the Tampa Bay Lightning, a 33-year-old, 4 years, $25 million, 6.25 until 2027, 64 points in all 82 games played. Again, this is a heavy one for me for Killorn and all of us, even if you're not a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Spent 805 games, 466 points, 2 cups in 11 seasons with the Lightning. They also get Radko Gudas, 3 years, $12 million from the Panthers, had 17 points. He's going to fit into that bottom 6 on the defensive side. But Alex Killorn going from the Lightning to the Ducks, what do you make of that?
Yeah, John, first of all, the Anaheim Ducks are better. They are just those 2 names alone. They are better. And obviously, we know about the young talent there, and that's exciting. But at some point, you have to supplement what is just young, exciting talent. And they absolutely did that. Killorn, yeah, you could argue, okay, let's get ticky-tacky about the length and the term of the deal because he's 33, right? And we're looking at the back half of his career here. Can he have another full 82-game season? Is he going to be plus 18, 20 again? Is he going to have 60-plus points in a season again? You'd think you'd hope to say yes for at least a couple more years. Now, it certainly depends on the players around you as well. So I think you can expect that to regress a little bit. But you know what? Now here's our theme again, John. We've talked about a couple of players who just felt like they should always be on the team that they're on.
Yeah.
I think certainly about Iafallo. the name Alex Killorn will always be emblazoned on my brain as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even regardless if he explodes in Anaheim and gets 90 points this coming season and leads them to a playoff spot, I'll always think of Killorn as a Lightning. And Gudas a little less so. I do like that addition. I think that the term and the money is right for him, and I think he's going to make a great impact. But yeah, it's crazy to see Killorn in something other than that Lightning Bolt blue.
No doubt about it. Another team quickly that got better, and they were already a pain to play against. Look, I'm not going to call the Arizona Coyotes world beaters, but they were always a problem, and I think they can be so even more. Jason Zucker, 1 year, $5.3 million, so he got paid for sure. 48 points in that part of the season. Alexander Kerfoot goes from the Maple Leafs to the Coyotes, 2 years, $7 million, 3.5 until 2025, 32 points. But I think he can be a 40-plus point player because now he's playing on the Coyote side of it. Nick Bjugstad, 30 years old, 2 years, $4.2 million, about 210 of 2025, a 20-plus point veteran on that. And then Troy Stetcher, who I thought might stay with the Calgary Flames, he gets a 1 year deal at 1.10, and the Alex Galchenyuk signing, as we said, that is null and void. So Zucker, Kerfoot, Bjugstad, and Stetcher as the Coyotes continue to try to add.
Yeah, John, and I'm going to start, obviously, because of my bias, I'm going to start on behalf of the Calgary Flames fan base with just the crying face emoji. We're all sad that Troy Stetcher is not going to stay with the Calgary Flames. He was a great ad. We just talked about his team getting better, right? The Anaheim Ducks with Killorn and Gudas. Obviously those are a couple of top players. In Michael Stone and Troy Stetcher, we're talking about those kind of bottom pairing / seventh defensemen. But those are the types of players, especially when injuries come up, and they do come up, that can make a real difference. And if you're a playoff team, you need those depth players. Troy Stetcher, I think, and he is, of course, going back to Arizona where he had a previous stint. I think he likes playing there. I think he showed his value in his first go-round, and I think he's going to show even more value now. And honestly, look, the Kerfoot deal is a great one. I actually like the Bjugstad deal. If I had to just pick one of those two, I think Nick Bjugstad is going to be an impact player for the Coyotes as well. And, their situation, there's some upheaval there, a little bit of turmoil, turbulence. But they're still making moves that I think made a positive impact on the roster.
Yeah, you're bringing in players I think that are veterans that are going to stabilize everything for GM Bill Armstrong, as they're still waiting to get a new arena and not play at Mullen on that side. So for the Buffalo Sabres, I'll just lead into this. Here's who they need to sign. We're not even going to talk about everything else where they brought in because it was just Connor Clifton at 3 years, $10 million. But they got to sign Middlestat, Gergensons, Okposo, Yost, Krebs. And they also have to sign their defensemen Eric Johnson, Labushkin, Yokiharu, Bryson, and Stillman. And not to mention the biggest names that I left out, Rasmus Dahlin is an absolute priority. And the goaltender, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who was pretty good. He could be pretty good with Devin Levi in the back end, who got some games. Buffalo's got a lot of work to do as far as players that they need to get signed.
Yeah, I mean, and John, I won't be long-winded about this, but some of the names that pop out, I think all of them are important. Of course, I don't think all of them will end up staying with the Sabres. That's just the nature of the beast here. But Jurgensons in particular, I think Okposo should stay. I like Yost staying as well. Eric Johnson and Yokiharu, I think Stillman as well. So that's most of the list. I wouldn't want to lose Middlestat either. So this is a tough one. Is part of what has made them a little bit more successful. John, I'm going to actually throw a question back at you. You did a great job listing some of their forwards and defensemen that need to be signed. Let's count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forwards. Middlestat, Jurgensen, Okposo, Yost, and Krebs. And then it is 5 defensemen. If you had to focus on one of those two groups as the priority for the Buffalo Sabres, which way are you leaning? Which group are you sitting down and having negotiations with first?
I'm probably going to go with the forward group. I understand how important the defensemen are, but those are just names that stick out to me because they need to be able to prioritize goal scoring with Tage Thompson. So I'm going to go forward group.
Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, like I just said, wouldn't want to lose Yokiharu, wouldn't want to lose Johnson. I like Stillman as well, but boy, Middlestat, Jurgensons, Okposo, Yost, and Krebs, any one of those is a tough loss. And I think that they will probably lean the way you were just leaning, my friend.
Yeah, nothing starts. Again, we're saying this on the fourth round. I'm going to quickly move on. Nothing starts before you re-sign Rasmus Dahlin.
Exactly right. No, that is a given. I'm glad that you made that very, very clear. I am 100% on board with that as well. Darlene drives the bus here. Everyone else is just grabbing a seat behind him, and we'll see how many of those seats are filled by the names that we just talked about.
So there is some new seats for some new players in Carolina. It might just be some in-house moves for some, but the goaltending tandem stays put. Freddie Anderson, we know about that, about 2 years, 33-year-old. He just got to stay healthy. In his 34 games, 21, 11, and 1, 248, 903 on Team Ronta as well. He likes it in Carolina in the backup role. Sometimes starts 1 year, 1.5. Hey, I mean, for 19, 3 and 3, 9, 10, 4 shutouts, 223. Those are good numbers, especially for a backup goaltender. Jesper Fast will stay where he is as well for 2 more years, about $5 million, 29 points and +8 and 80 games played, about 240 per till 2025. But here's the situation, and a couple interesting moves. One I like, one I might be not so sure about, but I don't know yet. I got to ask you about it. So Michael Bunting from the Toronto Maple Leafs, 27 years of age, 3 years, 13.5 to go to the Canes, 4.5 to 2026. He did play all 82 games, 49 points, 23 goals, 26 assists, +21. He had 103 penalty minutes. He does got a lofty reputation. But Dmitry Orlov, boy, did he get paid. He dominated from the trade over from the Boston Bruins, and now he goes to Carolina. How about this for the 31-year-old? 2 years, $15.5 million on that side, 7.75 until 2025, 36 points this season. But with Boston, in 23 games played, 17 points, a +10 on that side. That was a defense. So it's likely the biggest get of the pool in Dmitry Orlov, but does that push the Hurricanes over the top?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts here, John. Is there a term? Can we make it official? Is there such thing as a long-term rental? That feels a little bit like what Dmitry Orlov will be for the Hurricanes. I think that's a little steep, but his performance demands that kind of money, and he got paid. He certainly did. And coming off of a regular season that is better than any other in history, he was a big part of that. I think Carolina was pretty shrewd to get him. I like that. Bunting, I also like. I'm wondering where he's going to fit in. That reputation piece is very interesting as well. I'm wondering if that, specifically, if that was a contributing factor to them making the choice to bringing him in. Because, yeah, he can contribute. Nice balance, right? 23 goals, 26 assists, as you said, but also isn't afraid to get a little crazy. So Michael Bunting is part of the Hurricanes franchise now. And speaking of which, we just talked about Martin St. Louis. We like him as a bench boss. Rod Brind'Amour, one of the best. The Hurricanes, I think, a fantastically run franchise. They've been in it. They've been around it, John. They've been close. I think that these are the types of moves, and especially keeping Jesper Fast.
Yes.
I like his depth scoring. Got to keep that. You know, why? If it ain't broke, right? It's another cliche, but I'm going to throw it in the mix. Let's not try to over-tinker, and they did not. I like that. I think these new additions will be coached well by Rod Brind'Amour, and I think the Hurricanes are extra scary going into the season.
Yeah, because I know Alex Iniern from the Carolina side, where he's living at right now, was 4 games against Florida in the Eastern Conference Finals where they were all 1-goal losses. Again, I just want to reiterate this before moving to Columbus. Carolina didn't play poorly.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Their goaltending situation, hey, keep it locked in. They did a solid job. We have, let's everybody from, how about Brent Burns plus Orlov? Let's put them on a pairing together.
Right.
I mean, that's some heads are getting smashed, and then once those heads are smashed, we're scoring goals as well. So I think the Hurricanes have put themselves in an even better position for sure.
Yes, they have. So now we're going to move on to Jarmo Kekalainen here with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So Mike Babcock has got his deal as the new head coach, 2 years, $4 million. I know we've talked about that. I was pretty excited that Adam Fantilli actually fell to the Columbus Blue Jackets because he will join another U of M product in Kent Johnson. And I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. I know I put this in bold. I could be completely wrong. The Columbus Blue Jackets were kind of the doormat of the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to say that they're going to move all the way into a playoff spot, but I like the forward depth that they continue to add, and I think that they're going to give some teams problems. And I'm going to go out for the record and say this. the biggest mover as far as point totals in the Eastern Conference, I'm going to say it right now, Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, you're right, John. And a couple of things here. I agree with you. I just love Fantilli as a player, wherever he was going to end up. Obviously he's going to be a star. I think it's very interesting, and dare I say it's not a word I've used for describing the Columbus Blue Jackets in recent memory, but I think there are some exciting things happening. Now, you and I have talked about Mike Babcock. You obviously have pretty close experience with the Mike Babcock show. But I will say, and this is just anecdotal, but I heard an interview with him on NHL Network Radio where he was asked directly about some of his coaching style, and obviously he has a ton of accomplishments, but has pushed his players a little bit much. Kind of that, of course, not the same type of person or approach, but that Daryl Sutter mindset of just, you got to go through the grind. I'm going to break you down to make you better. And Babcock was saying all the right things. Look, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how the team comes together. But I liked what I heard from him. He was acknowledging that there's a new era in hockey here where, you don't have to have kid gloves. It's not like you're babysitting. These are grown men who are professional athletes being paid millions of dollars. And there are expectations. But Babcock was acknowledging that his approach will be a little bit different now that he has had some time away from the league and will be stepping back in to a head coach role. And again, like I just said, don't often say this about Columbus, but I am excited. And it is the Johnny Gaudreau interest for me as well. I certainly hope he continues to succeed. I think he'll be a great example for a player like Adam Fantilli, and they certainly won't be a doormat anymore, like you said.
No, I don't think so either. So the Dallas Stars, again, the former assistant GM for the Red Wings, Jim Nill, again, one-year moves, Gavin Bayreuther, Sam Steele, Craig Smith, Joel Hanley. The bottom six gets 2 years, 1.6 for the defensive side. Here's the thing. I think it's another Vegas kind of A-plus situation. I know there wasn't a lot that Dallas could do against the cap, but the 1 year, $3 million buyout of Matt Duchene, right? So the 32 years old, 71 games played, 56 points. He did have 86 points in 21-22 for Nashville. I don't think you get players like him too often, especially for 1 year and $3 million. You got to figure out what's going to happen with Joe Pavelski probably at the end of this season, but Dallas needs more goal scoring, and I imagine that Duchene's going to do his part.
Yeah, he definitely will. I think that he's a great fit in Dallas. And, you make a great point about Pavelski. Like, the clock will eventually run out for little Joe here, but I think that he's going to still make a great impact this coming season. Will it be his last? We don't know. But, another great point from you. Yes, they absolutely could have been in the Stanley Cup final if it weren't for the eventual winners, Vegas Golden Knights. Dallas is set up for a lot of success. I don't think they're exactly the same kind of team as Carolina, but since we've been doing some comparisons, we think about Colorado and sort of mirroring with Boston. I'm looking at Carolina, and there's a bit of a mirror with the Dallas Stars. They've been well run, well coached, and I think they have the pieces to make a lot of noise again.
So I got to take the floor here. I apologize. This might be a little bit longer segment, but I think we're in a good approach of keeping everything timely. But a little bit of clapback for me, a little personal heat that it's getting me a little angry, honestly, because on the local side for Detroit sports, all I heard was Steve Yzerman's not doing enough, and this is year 5. He's not making a big move. This team's not getting the playoffs. They're not doing much better other than treading water. And they were saying anyone that still follows Steve Yzerman on the local ticket here, 97.1 was a Steve bot, just a robot, no thoughts for themselves. Well, what are you saying now? Because when you get into year 5, we talked about Justin Abelkader, Franz Nielsen, Jimmy Howard, some of the other stuff where I talked about the nuclear wasteland. And look, we love covering hockey between Cooper Hopkins and myself. And I don't make this hot button radio issues. We try to bring a league-wide coverage and be pretty much straight down the middle and fair with everything else that we're doing. But you would not catch us in a hot second criticizing anything that Steve Yzerman's doing other than what needs to be criticized. Last year, I talked about Ben Sherratt. This year, I'm going to talk about Justin Hall. I didn't like it all that much. But for everything else, do not tell me that he's not a GM that's inept, that needs to be fired, and this team has to make the playoffs now, or it's a complete and utter failure, because I believe that's an absolute freaking joke.
Yeah, John, you're right on. I like that you got on your soapbox for a second.
Yzerman has gotten way too much criticism. He is making choices, difficult choices, for a franchise that, when he was on the ice as a player, was the true top of the NHL. I still see his choices and his decision-making as pieces and choices that are going to push the Red Wings back into that level in the league. I think it's just I think it's a little bit lazy. I don't want to come after a fan base that I'm not a part of, but it's a little bit lazy. I think it's too basic thinking to not look at some of the nuances of what Yzerman is doing. Obviously, you can speak to it in greater detail than I can, but from afar, from the coast where I am, I still like what Stevie Y is doing, and I think that there are good things coming. Maybe that's rose-colored glasses, John. You tell me, but I'm still feeling positive.
I am too. We're going to go through some of these moves right now, so I won't spend time on the depth stuff. So Matt Luff, Christian Fischer, might be some Griffins, might be some back-end Red Wings. Yamamoto, he does go to Seattle off the bat from Ken Allen for 1 year, 1.5, so we'll see how that works out for the Kraken. But Steve did that to get Klim Kostin. I thought he was excellent in the bottom six for the Edmonton Oilers, the hard-nosed Russian player. 2 years, $4 million until 2025 on that end. He's going to fit in some grit and sandpaper and probably score you some goals. So Philip Zadina, another one of these things when you talk about Steve Yzerman, I'm talking about Ken Holland and Philip Zadina. He was drafted 6th overall, the 23-year-old. He agreed to contract termination. He gave up his $3.65 million. He saved the Red Wings quite a bit of money on that end. He ended up signing a 1-year deal with the Sharks. I was stunned that he gave up the money. I would have liked to see him keep it and move on and continue on, but he wanted a complete fresh start. I bring that in with Ken Allen again. Dennis Cholowski, the 20th pick, 28 goals in 190 games for the defenseman. He was gone. Zadina's completely gone. Again, I understand sometimes with the first-round picks it doesn't work out. When you think about some of the situations with Jesse Puljujärvi, or I'm thinking of one of the other ones on that side, Neil Yakupov for the Edmonton Oilers when they're like top 2, top 3. You can't miss on those ones continuously and expect your franchise to go in the right direction. So I, for one, I understand Ken Holland on the salary cap, non-salary cap era made some great moves when you can sign Brett Hull, Brendan Shanahan, all these other guys to as much money as you want. When you have to run a team under contract situation, he was poor. So the fact that Edmonton's not kind of just treading water, it doesn't make me sad either. So goalies, Alex Lyon, 15 games played. He was a savior a little bit for the Florida Panthers in the back end, 942-289-912. He might be spending time with the Griffins because James Reimer might be running backup, a 35-year-old, 43 games played, 12, 21, and 8, 348, 893 shutouts, but he did play with the Sharks on that side. 1-year deal for Reimer, 2 for Lyon. And again, these are not major moves, but we'll get into those. But Ville Husso did not have a backup last year, so we're hoping that Reimer and Lyon can provide at least some help.
Yeah, no, John, that's a good summary. I mean, frankly, there's not a ton that I can add to that. I think that we're about to get into a couple of names that one of which is a forward that I really like. I know you really like, so I won't hold this up. Let's just keep it rolling. I'm with you all the way.
So here's one that I'm not feeling. I didn't feel this last year. Cooper Hopkins and I talked about it with Ben Sherratt, the 31-year-old defenseman, and Justin Hall. I'm not going to sit there and talk about all the stuff they do in Toronto about him being a complete pylon, but I think the fact that he got 3 years, $10.2 million on that side is because he's a right-handed shot, and you don't have a lot of those. So on that side for Hall, about 18 points on that side. He's not going to bring you much offensively, just 2 goals. You hope that he can go ahead and hit somebody. So if Hall and Sherratt is a pairing, again, I got a receding hairline. I might pull out some of that. But this does not, and again, we'll talk about that between Simon Edmondson and some of these other ones. You need to be able to put a team around it that you can play some defense. I hope Hall can do it on the back end side. Here's one that I love, though, and I do want to take a minute to talk about this with Daniel Sprung. The 26-year-old, 66 games played, 21 goals, 25 assists, 46 points, plus 13. I know some people will say that you wish you could have signed him for more than the 1 year, $2 million. Hey, look, I don't care if it's a proving ground deal or not. I know when you put Daniel Sprung anywhere between that bottom 6, he gets you goals and he does everything that you need to do. My only question is we're waiting for the rest of the family on the Chris Ilitch side because Mike Ilitch isn't there anymore because he unfortunately passed away. They do not retire number 91 for Sergei Fedorov. I would not like to see Sprung wear that number, but I'm not going to argue if he gets me another 46 points.
Man, oh man, that first of all, that's a great way to describe it. And I do think, man, I assumed, John, and literally until this moment, I assumed that Fedorov's number was retired and in the rafters, and it is not. I don't think, obviously, completely different situations, but it makes me think about Theo Fleury for the Flames.
Mm-hmm.
His number is not retired by the team, but nobody has won number 14 or number 14
Right.
Since the last time that Theo wore it for the franchise. Yeah, boy, that 91 for the Red Wings, that's the only player I would ever think of if I think of 91 in red and white, Fedorov. But Daniel Sprong, I will say, just to keep our pace moving here, I'm surprised the Kraken let him go. I think he was a great contributor, and you nailed it right on the head. You could put him almost anywhere in that bottom six, and he's going to find a way to contribute. I think that's not a massive loss for the Kraken, but one that they may feel more than they expect. And I think he's going to do good things with the Red Wings.
Yeah, it's a good depth signing for Detroit. Don't really lose anything. Shingas to spare another one of those, another one-year deal, about 41 points at 75 games played. He was really good in Arizona. He started really good in Philadelphia. That's going to work out pretty well, especially in the bottom six. Here's where I want to stop just for a second. I want to make the case for JT Compher. So fans were angry at Steve Yzerman for not making some of these big moves. And again, I can skip on some of this. And again, this is big, and I'm going to throw this out there. So $19.4 million tied up to 2027 in between centers. Larkin, Kopp, and Compher. The argument is you could do better with a 40-goal scorer that Detroit needs, and we'll get to that. And you'll still see them as a first-round exit. But I look at Yzerman betting on smart players like Compher. 5 years, $25.5 million, 5.1 until 2028, 52 points on that side. And I'll even grant you that maybe he could end up with 35, 40 points because you're not playing with the Colorado Avalanche forwards, especially with Rantanen and McKinnon. But I can guarantee you also don't have to worry about Compher on the ice. So when you're talking about Larkin, Compher, Kopp, and Michael Rasmussen's probably better toward a left wing side because I don't want to bury him on the fourth C. These are guys that play a 200-foot game that you just don't have to worry about, and I like that.
Yeah, John, you know what? It depends on who you talk to. You could flip a coin, but any NHL fan, media member, etc., you flip that coin, on one hand, it's going to come up goaltending. Goaltending drives the success of any team. I think on the other hand, I mean, yeah, listen, you have to talk about everything holistically at some point, but I think that the things that are at the tip of the spear, so to speak, one fan in one moment is going to say goaltending, the other fan in the other moment is going to say it's your play at the center position. And I think that you make a great point about those centers that are now Red Wings. And man, I would not shake a stick at that. I would be thrilled if the Calgary Flames had that lineup up and down the middle. So I think that's going to be a strength of the team. Compher is a huge get. I really like the addition, and call it a gut feeling. I think he's going to fit in beautifully.
I think so too. Whether it's second or third, you can flip-flop Copper or Compher. I think he'd be fine. So I put it as, and again, I'm just speeding through this, a Vegas and Seattle light. That's what Detroit looked like going into this. And I'm going to say this openly to you. I put this in the notes as well. Detroit was going to have over $25 million of cap space going into next year if they didn't trade for DeBrincat. And I was honestly thinking I'm hoping Yzerman's done making moves, because if he's not sold on DeBrincat and they had to give up too much, then who knows what was going to happen. So essentially we kind of thought around here, and I'm not saying this for sure because people are going to think I'm crazy. For somebody like DeBrincat who could score 40 goals, it'd be a first-round pick, and maybe Sider, maybe Raymond. That was pretty much it on the top end. But here's the power move. The Farmington Hills, Michigan native comes home, the 25-year-old. 66 points, minus 31, but I think that's going to change a little bit. I think it comes home to a little bit of a discount, a 3-year extension, so part of the 4-year deal from the arbitration side of it. $31.5 million in the extension, 7.875 until 2027. It's 450 games played, 6 seasons. On that side of Chicago, one with Ottawa. It was 82 games played in 4 seasons, and that's big because he's 5'8", 178, not the biggest guy. 187 goals, 186 assists, 373 points. His lowest output was 18 goals to 41 goals twice. And Yzerman debt Kubalik on that end, and Donovan Zabrango on a conditional first and fourth, probably going to end up being the Wings pick over Boston, depending on where that goes. Kubalik had 45 points this year, and the lowest point for DeBrincat was 45 on that end. So when you think about DeBrincat, I want to throw this out there too. again, he's had seasons to where, 56 points for Perron, 79 points for Dylan Larkin. I think this is going to be a huge signing for the Red Wings, and essentially I could go ahead and tell you maybe DeBrincat gets 25, 30 goals. Maybe he doesn't get 40, but I would say solidly DeBrincat could probably get you 70 points. And this team, maybe they don't make the playoffs this year, but I do expect them to be a player up until March. And when we get into the following season, I think I'm going to be calling some Red Wings playoff games because DeBrincat, for that turn and what he can bring to you, I mean, you have to be happy with that.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts here, John. I'll try to be brief. First of all, I just love the narrative here. I mean, you got the Michigan kid coming back to the hometown team to play for the ultimate Detroit Wings legend in Stevie Y. Obviously, I know he's the GM, so you're not directly playing for him, but you understand where I'm going with this. I mean, for a Michigander like yourself, it's pretty much win-win-win. That's checking so many boxes. That is fantastic stuff. And I do agree with you. I think there is a slight discount there. We want to call it the hometown discount. Great. But either way, yeah, I think that this is probably the primary reason why several minutes ago when we were talking about the Detroit Red Wings fan base and some of the judgments of Steve Yzerman, that's why I am reserving judgment. And I'm saying, wait a second, Stevie Y is taking big swings here, and he's really trying to make this a well-rounded franchise again with a staff. This is what DeBrincat represents, and I think this fills the description box for a lot of the roster players on Detroit. He is established, but still growing, right? 25 years old, established in the league. He's not a green rookie, but he's put up numbers and still has not even begun to hit his peak. That's still 2-3 years away. So, and listen, it matters. We're going to, we haven't really gone into this narrative. We don't need to necessarily in detail, but players choosing to play in certain places, right? Making choices. Well, DeBrincat is exiting a situation where that's an up-and-coming franchise, right? He's leaving a franchise that's growing for another that is growing. So obviously he prefers Detroit for personal reasons and professional reasons. I'm excited to see the Red Wings this year. And I know, John, you're maybe playing it a little bit conservative. I know the feeling. We don't want to get our hopes up too early. But man, oh man, Detroit's going to have a lot to show on the ice. And I think they're going to bring it. Teams who are going to have to look out. If they look past Detroit, so be it. I think they're going to pay the price.
Yeah, I'm reserving judgment, keeping on the Water Wings for this season. I do want to close out quickly and just say this. All the moves that were made, again, Yzerman didn't have to give up any big prospects. And if there is a Marco Kasper or Edvinsson or some other stuff in the depth, the beauty is here, Cooper, none of them get blocked. If they make the team on a training camp and they dominate, they're going to have a spot. You're just adding more depth in there when you have guys like Comfort and DeBrincat and everything else. So very happy to have Steve Yzerman here. You're never going to hear any complaints from me outside of the trot and hole. I get it. Not everything can be perfect. Verona didn't work out. Not everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows, but DeBrincat, that was the big hole everybody was waiting for. He got it. So I hope everybody can just shrug their shoulders and sit in silence for a little bit for these doubters.
No doubting over here, my friend. I'm right with you. I have become a Red Wings fan thanks to you, and I'm glad because of moves like this. Already a good team, got better thanks to Stevie Y. In playoffs, notwithstanding, either way, going to be an exciting time in Detroit for sure.
Yep, so we will move on here with the Panthers. Again, I'm speeding through this so we keep everything timely, which we will. So Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 1 year. Dmitry Kulikov, Mike Riley, Nico Mikkola, as they try to change some things. Evan Rodriguez, this is a big one. 4 years, $12 million. 3 Purchell, 2027, 39 points and 69 games played. Kevin Stenlund was also added. Anthony Stolarz was also added. I like all the additions, Cooper, but we do have to go back to the injuries that were unfortunately sustained in the first round for the Florida Panthers against the Boston Bruins. They're going to be missing Aaron Ekblad and Matthew Tkachuk probably for the start of the year. I like the additions, but I do think because of Ekblad and Tkachuk possibly banged up, they'll be slow out of the gate, and Florida might have to have a similar type season again. But what say you?
Yeah, look, I think that there may be a Stanley Cup hangover for the Panthers, and usually we associate that with the team that wins the Stanley Cup, right? And of course, we'll keep one eye on Vegas for that very reason. But I think just because of the grandiose way that the Florida Panthers overachieved in the playoffs, I would not expect them to come out like gangbusters and just be rolling over everyone to start in the upcoming regular season. And at the core of that reasoning is the fact that two of their best players, are presumably not going to be on the ice at all. And then when they do get back on the ice, it might take them a little time to get ramped back up and up to full speed. Just really quickly, even though folks aren't necessarily expecting Oliver Ekman-Larsson to repeat the Norris Trophy winning year that he had this previous year, I do think that fits really well. If you can produce the way he did on the Sharks, you got to think that he's got at least a little more chance for continued success with the Panthers. I actually like Kulikov as well. And then Evan Rodriguez, I'm going to keep our theme going. That's a name that, for whatever reason, I will always think of in cerulean and blue, my friend, to steal your terminology. But, he is a solid player. Again, that 70 games played, 40 points. I like the production. I think he has a chance to be a regular 20-goal scorer on a team like Florida. Obviously, Colorado is no slouch as well. You'd think he may have been able to break that barrier there. But, call it a hunch. So I like that addition as well. Look out for Florida to keep teams on the back foot, but they may be on the back foot to start the year, as you pointed out.
So for the Minnesota Wild, another Lightning member, Pat Maroon, he's going to go to the Wild from Tampa Bay for a 7th-round pick and retaining 20% of the salary. What the Minnesota Wild need to do to stay in contention, I believe they got to get Philip Gustafsson signed, just 25 years of age. He was excellent, 22, 9, and 7, 210 goals against, 931, and 3 shutouts. I think he's going to be the number one in that because Marc-Andre Fleury has one more year left on that side. As Bill Guerin's still working with the buyouts of Parise and Suter. So for the Nashville Predators, it was a fringe playoff team, but now they insert former Florida head coach Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz. Ryan O'Reilly, 4 years, $18 million, $4.5 million, 2027. He goes from the Leafs to the Predators. I was pretty surprised on that end. I think he can still maintain a 50-plus point pace if he can do that even at 32. Gustav Nyquist, he just needs to get healthy. His new home is in Nashville. 2 years, 6.37. Luke Shen, that was from the Maple Leafs to Nashville. You have Alexander Carrier getting re-signed, the former Vegas prospect, and Cody Glass. He was a 6th pick in their inception. 72 games played, 35 points. Denis Gurianov has signed. But I still believe, Cooper, that they only go as far as Jussi Saros takes them. I know that's not a world-beating take, but they also have a ton of expiring contracts next year.
Yeah, the Predators, this is one of the more interesting teams out of this entire list. All of these, listen, on paper, I actually like, top to bottom, all of the additions that you just went through. John, I like, without exception, I like them all. Now, are any of them going to make the Predators into a different franchise overnight? No, and I think the answer is also no, even for someone like Ryan O'Reilly, who at still just 32 years old, doesn't it feel like he's been in the league for 20 years
yes.
At this point? It feels like Ryan O'Reilly is just a grizzled old veteran. He's only 32, and he's going to be with the Preds for a good chunk of time here, the next 4 years at $18 million. For whatever reason, I don't expect him to necessarily be the kind of contributor that he was when the Blues won the Stanley Cup. And for that reason, I agree with you, my friend. It's going to be all about goaltending. Jussi Saros is elite. If he can remain elite, the Predators will always be in the conversation. If he is not elite, I don't know if, even though I like these names, I don't know if any single one of them or even groups of them are going to be enough to push the Preds where they want to go.
So we can maybe combine these things here really quickly between the Islanders and the Rangers, but I will start with the Islanders here. So Mayfield gets extended. Scott Mayfield, the 30-year-old, for 7 years, $24.5 million. Lou Lamoriello loves to get out the contracts, $3.5 per until 2030. So with the long term on that, you get less money. Pierre Engvall, 7 years, $21 million. He'd be a 20-point hopeful for the forward side. So alongside, Barzal, Horvat, Anders Lee, Nelson, John Gabriel Pageau, those are some of those guys with Romanov, Pollock, and Pelech on the back end. But I got to stop at this because we talk about who's the best goaltender in New York. I think you had to do this. And again, if I'm Lou Lamoriello or myself as John, I'm making this same move. Ilya Sorokin, 8 years, $66 million, 8.25 until 2031, and 62 games played. It was a 31-22-7 record, 234 goals against, 924 save percentage, 6 shutouts. Is he the best goaltender in New York? That's a conversation that we can have.
Yeah, it's a conversation we have to have. And listen, when you're getting an 8-year deal at 8.25 per, that's the kind of money where your GM believes that you are. That's all that really matters to Sorokin. And we just talked about some of the UC Saros. That certainly applies to the Predators, but I think it applies even more so to the Islanders. I mean, these names, right? Barzal, the former Seattle Thunderbird, Bo Horvat, former Canuck, right? Lee, Nelson, Palmieri. Those names, they're great. You add some youth that I like, especially Pelech, right? All those things are great. But the Islanders will go as Sorokin goes. He has to remain elite. If the Islanders can even put an average team in front of him on the ice, they're still going to be major problems for their opponents. But if Sorokin falters, right, if we're talking in year 3, year 4, who knows what they've accomplished? Have they reached their goals? Have they gone deep in the Stanley Cup playoffs? All of that, of course, is yet to be seen. But his teammates and the management in New York on Long Island absolutely believe in him, and the contract shows that.
Yeah, you have an aging forward group. The defensive group's probably in a better spot, but then you have that in your goaltender. You got to get things done. With the Rangers, they're going to look a little bit different. Nick Bonino, Tyler Pitlick, Blake Wheeler, he gets the buyout from the Jets. Wheeler, 36 years old now, but he still had 55 points in 72 games played. They signed defenseman Connor Mackey. They get the backup and goaltender Jonathan Quick, because they're still waiting on Yaroslav Palat if he wants to play, but I don't think he's playing there. They do get a big one in re-signing Keandre Miller. I love the young defenseman, 23 years of age. 2 years, $7.74 million, $3.87 until 2025. He keeps getting better every year. He had 43 points in 79 games played. It's a bridge deal, and if he keeps improving like that, he's going to get some massive money. So here's the thing for me. I still love the kid line, Lafreniere, Kakko, Hedl. But Cooper, I'm starting to worry that with Artemi Panarin at 31 and 11.6 cap hit, Zibanejad at 30 at 8.5, Kreider at 32 at 6.5, that this offensive core is hitting their peak. Because we know Shesterkin and the defense there with Lindgren and Adam Fox and Trouba and Miller are great. But when you're trading for assets like Patrick Kane and Vlad Tarasenko that doesn't stick around, you're getting rid of your draft picks and your core is getting older. Is New York going to start to be on the downturn a little bit?
Boy, can I believe, can either of us believe, John, that we're actually having this conversation? It's hard to, but we better believe it, because I think you might be on to something. First of all, the positives. Despite the age, I really love the addition of Blake Wheeler. For some reason, again, a lot of this is a little bit of gut feeling for me. I think that's a great fit. I like Bonino as a depth forward as well. In particular, I think Miller, just going to keep our theme going here, John, going to run into this franchise. Keandre Miller feels like a long-time New York Ranger.
Yes.
I think on this prove it deal, he will do exactly that. He will, I think, end up being the leader on the blue line for the Rangers. And the kid line, yes, I love the kid line as well. I'm not as worried about Zibanejad. I am a little bit worried more so about Panarin and Kreider. Kreider, we watch him contribute year in and year out. At what point do we start to see the age become a factor? It could be as early as this season. I think that's part of why you're asking the question. So we may not, either one of us, we may not have a definitive answer right now, but I think we're well within our right to have the question at least put up on the board.
I think so too. So very quickly here for Ottawa, when we talk about some of the moves and talk about the trade, you get Kubalik on the other side. Donovan Zabringa is a prospect from Detroit. He goes back home to Ottawa. Here's a situation for me. A lot of money's coming off the books. A lot of the names are small alongside with Shabbat and Chikrin because it's all young kids that are playing. That's why they brought in Claude Giroux last year. Here's an interesting one for me that I will stop on before we do move on to keep it timely here. So Jonas Korpisalo, 5 years, $20 million. He doesn't stay in LA. He goes to Ottawa. 4 per until 2028. 39 games played, 18, 14, and 4, 2, 8, 7, 9, 14. He's going to be the new anchor. Again, you got Kevin Mandolese and some of these other guys that are 20, 21 years of age. Mads Sogard, big goaltenders, 6'6", 6'7". But Jonas Korpisalo has shown himself to be a good goaltender, but he has not shown himself to be very durable. So I do wonder if the 20, 21, 22-year-old goaltenders will have to be the back end piece just in case Korpisalo doesn't work out because he got a pretty good, nice deal. It's kind of like Jack Campbell's last year.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, and I think this goaltending situation more than any other that we have mentioned. I'm scanning back through my brain right now. No, I'm going to stick with it. I think that the fact that you mentioned the health situation, that could be real. And boy, this is a bad pun. I realized it as soon as it popped in my head. That could be real thin ice for the Senators. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Tip your waiter and waitress. Yeah, I think we're going to have to keep an eye on Korpisalo. I like the terms of the deal, but that could really backfire against a Senators team that is moving, I think, in the right direction still. We can look at, whether or not the construction of the roster is ideal. Probably not. But Korpisalo can make a big impact. We'll just have to see if he can stay healthy.
So for the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals, I put them together because you kind of have them do. When you have Crosby and Ovechkin, they kind of just tread that same line. So Kyle Dubas from Toronto to Pittsburgh tries to reshape the roster and get a fresh start and move things forward. Matt Nieto, Noel Acciari on that side, Lars Eller, some bridge deals. Ryan Graves does get a big one there from the Devils to the Pittsburgh Penguins, $27 million, 4.5 until 2029. He had 26 points in 70 games played and a +84 for his career. So that's a slam dunk signing for me in the back end because you're going to have to replace Chris Letang at some point. Alex Nedeljkovic, the former Red Wing, 1 year, $1.5 million. He's trying to get back in the league, but we get another goaltending signing. And again, another one. If he just stays healthy, we already know what he can do. Tristan Jarry, 28 years of age, 5 years, $26.88 million, 5.3 until 2028. 47 games played, 24, 13, and 7, 290, 907, and 2 shutouts. And 1 year, non-committal, really no worries of Vinny Hinostroza and Andres Johansson for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they're adding a lot. They're still trying to keep that core going like we're talking to last year. But I think Kyle Dubas did a pretty good job so far.
Yeah, I actually agree. And this is why Alex been on the broadcast this whole time. He's been waiting for us to get here. And two names that I really like in the forward group are Acciari and Eller in particular. I think Nieto's great as well. I just happen to like Acciari and Eller as two pickups. And Nedeljkovic in goal along with Acciari, I think two positives. But what is going to still drive basically everyone's attention and drive discussions is what's happening with the old guys. That's when you put it in your notes. Right. The old guard, John. It's until it is not. That is what it will be. It's always going to be about Sid the Kid and those players around him that have been there for so long and define what the Penguins are. It's going to be fascinating to see how the new pieces fit in. But until a time yet to be determined, they are just pieces around those pillars of the franchise of Pittsburgh.
So in between for Washington, Martin Feravari, 23-year-old defenseman, $8.3 million for 3 years, 2.67, 16 points minus 11. He's pretty good in his early parts of the season. I'd like to see that portion continue to return. Matthew Phillips from Calgary on that side in a 1 year minimum. Max Pacioretty, man, I just love to see him back on the ice. It's his second ACL tear. He came back too early. And quickly, before we move on from this, are playoffs out of the question for Pittsburgh and Washington? We asked it last year. I got to ask it again, my friend.
I'm going to say no. They're not out of the question for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Even with Alex Ovechkin, John, I'm going to say they are out of the question for the Washington Capitals. One point I do want to make, and it's not going to push them into the playoff picture, I don't think, but the Matthew Phillips pickup from Calgary could be sneaky. I know he's 25 and hasn't really proven himself at the NHL level, but I think he has more than what the Flames were allowing him to show, not giving him an opportunity necessarily to show it with the big club. And a comparison, different type of player, but just another comparison. Both of these players coached by Ryan Huska, who is now taking over for Daryl Sutter in Calgary. Garnet Hathaway, he came up in the AHL in the Flames system, did have a couple of seasons with the big club, mostly on the fourth line, but then went to the Capitals, and his career blossomed, and he is now a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. Matthew Phillips, who knows? We'll see if he follows a similar path, but I do wish him the best. But tell me if you think I'm crazy, John. I think the Penguins still might be in that conversation. It might be a bubble conversation, but it's not out of the question to be in the playoffs. Washington, for some reason, I don't think it's going to be in the cards. What do you say?
And plug your ears, Alec, on that side, because you know this all too well. All they had to do last year was beat the Chicago Blackhawks at home in the final game of the regular season. Take care of your business. Pittsburgh's back in the playoffs. Washington's out.
And there you have it.
So I'm going to go ahead for the sake of time because we're at the 90 minutes. Cooper, I don't know how long you can stay with this between the 90 and 100. So I do want to get to 3 more teams. I'm going to skip on the Sharks, but we do have Anthony Duclair. He's going to get a lot of points there. I do wish him well. That's going to be a big loss for the Florida Panthers. I thought he had an excellent top 6 game. But for the Seattle Kraken, there's a lot of work to do here. So I do want to make sure we spend the time on this correctly. So Vince Dunn, with about $15 million in cap space, you do got to get him signed. Kel Fleury was signed 2 years, 1.6, $800K to 2025. Will Borgen on the back end is signed. They got that all done. And in between some of the situations, make sure I look at it, they did lose Carson Soucy and Ryan Donato and Daniel Sprong, but they got Kailer Yamamoto on the buyout. But I think that can be okay on the forward group because we do know Ty Cartier, and I got a chance to watch him from the Coachella Valley Firebirds, especially a couple of the other names I'll mention. Ty Cartier is coming, and Shane Wright is as well. So when you lose some of that back end, it's important that you have the pieces to replace them, and they do.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're taking just a moment here, John. And you know what's so interesting about the moves for the Kraken? They're still such a young team that all these moves feel monumental, right? It feels like this is sort of the culmination of the theme that we've had where these players feel like they're always going to be with these franchises. And that, you know what, just because the franchise has only been around for a couple of seasons, it felt like Donato would always be a member of the Seattle Kraken. It felt like Carson Soucy would always be a member of the Seattle Kraken. Of course, that's not how this league works. Interestingly, of those names that you mentioned, Soucy, Donato, and Sprong, we already talked about Sprong. I think the Kraken are going to miss Daniel Sprong. I'll just leave it there. Yeah. But interestingly, and I sort of set myself up for this, and I think most folks know this in passing. I mentioned that Matt Barzal, of course, longtime New York Islander, he was drafted by the Islanders, and he had been playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. Well, Kailer Yamamoto gets to go back to Seattle, Washington, where he played his junior hockey with the Seattle Thunderbirds. So I'm just curious to see if being back in that environment maybe sparks him a little bit. I like that he's getting a new opportunity. I think he was given opportunities in Edmonton and didn't necessarily, of course, very different circumstances. He's not a goaltender, but kind of like Vladar with Calgary, you're given these chances, but they're short-lived. You don't really get to sink your teeth in.
Right.
I think that playing on a team that is a little more well-rounded than the Oilers, at least in their forward play, I think that is going to lend itself very well. I think Yamamoto will shine in Seattle. I'm ready to watch Ty Cartier for a full season. You asked a question in your notes, John, about Shane Wright. Still so young. He was given one of those opportunities I just described, didn't really get to fully kind of wrap his arms around it and make the most of it necessarily. So that is one where I'm up in the air with Shane Wright in particular. Love the addition of Dumoulin from Pittsburgh. Sorry, Alec. I think that's going to be a great fit on the blue line in Seattle. But yeah, that Shane Wright is still the roll of the dice for me. He has so much potential, but can he realize it? Will this be the season where he really gets the chance to do that? Maybe, maybe not. We're going to see how the forward group shakes out.
Again, Shane Wright is just 19 years of age. Ty Cartier is 22. So no knee-jerk reactions for anybody in Seattle that wants to get farther past that second round. They're in a great situation. So Dumoulin, 31 years, as Cooper talked about that, 2 years, $6.3 million for the 31 years of age defenseman. It's 82 games played. It's 25 points and a career plus 93. So when you're talking about Erik Karlsson or some of those situations, that's going to cost you a lot of money. Someone that's going to absolutely lock things down and also probably be alongside Vince Dunn. I know he's not going anywhere, but Dumoulin's going to fit right in. I do want to make a case for this really quickly because we're watching that AHL Game 7 in between Hershey and Coachella Valley. I thought it was pretty damn cool. And I saw someone that really caught my eye. I don't know if he's going to make the team this year, but I can guarantee you he's making the team at least next year. I'm going to be on record for that. The 21-year-old defenseman Riker Evans, 71 games played, 44 points for the Firebirds. In the Calder Cup playoffs for the 21-year-old, this is a defense. 26 points in 26 games, 5 goals, 21 assists, 26 points for a plus 13. And Cole Lind, he might just be a career AHLer, but he's still just 24. That's what I've heard, at least on that side. 26 games played in the playoffs, 9 goals, 22 assists, 31 points. It is hard to make that jump, but he did have a 62-point season plus 11 for the Firebirds. And you're also going to get the return of Andre Burakovsky on that end. But man, Riker Evans, he's an offensive defenseman that can skate like the wind, and that sounds like a perfect addition very soon for the Seattle Kraken.
Yeah, and I love, John, that you bring up the Coachella Valley Firebirds. In their infancy, they go to the overtime of Game 7 in the Calder Cup final. They lose to the Hershey Bears, and these players that you just mentioned are huge pieces in the success that the Firebirds had. Immediately competitive at that level of professional hockey. Another thing that we can't forget about, I'm certainly glad that you didn't, just putting Andre Burakovsky back in the lineup, that makes Seattle a better team instantly. So that is a proven piece that is going to be added back in. Cole Lind, I think, is going to be able to jump in right away as well. And Evans is a little bit more of a wait and see. I don't think that I have any hesitation about him. But, yeah, you're right. Seattle looks to be not only well-rounded, they've certainly showed themselves to be well-rounded, getting contributions up and down the lineup in the playoffs just several weeks back. But I can only expect that to be further strengthened by these names that we brought up today.
So I know we talked about a step forward and maybe conference finals in the question, but I do want to throw a real quick question. We'll move on to Tampa Bay. I got one other team other than that, Toronto, and then we'll be done. But for Joy Decord, it's a 2-year extension with the Seattle Kraken, 26 years old, just $1.2 million per. I thought it was big because he had 2 shutouts in the finals and a 1 goal against loss on that end. So do you expect Joy Decord's probably going to be the backup there for Philip Grubauer?
Yeah, I think so. I like that, again, I don't mean to just constantly lean on, my thoughts about the Calgary Flames, but Decord feels like maybe even a slightly better Dan Vladar, and Grubauer being the Markstrom comparison, obviously. I think that the goaltender situation in Seattle is mostly solid. The main question for me is, can Grubauer be the Philip Grubauer that we saw in the playoffs, right? Because he wasn't in the regular season. He wasn't a disaster, but he certainly did not reach that elite level that we saw him reach when the competition really became crucial, to win rounds and get closer to lifting the ultimate prize. So I like the signing. Again, it reminds me of a couple of the teams that we've talked about already. If it ain't broke, I think that is exactly what Ron Francis is thinking in Seattle with his goalies. And one other player that we may have skipped over, John, is that Pierre-Edouard Bellemare now will be a member of the Seattle Kraken. And you question if he's on the 4th line. I think he's definitely on the 4th line. But you know what? You could do a lot worse than Bellemare when you're talking about 4th line forwards.
Yeah, you got to replace Sprong on that side and win some face-offs. So we got 2 other teams to end with. So we will keep this timely. Again, Cooper, I just wanted to make sure that we had all that situation. I didn't keep it too long, but we do have to have a little bit of discussion here with Tampa Bay and Toronto. So let's start with the Bolts here. So you and I overwhelmingly agreed last year with Anthony Cirelli, Mikhail Sergachev, and Eric Chernak. I know we stopped on it. And between Sergachev, 25, Hedman, 32, Chernak, 26. That's your top end defenseman. Perbix, 25-year-old, had a great year with Bogosian, DeHaan, maybe Radish in the mix. Their defense is still pretty good, but here's the thing for me. So you lost Alex Killorn, 64 points. Ross Colton, 32 points. Pat Maroon, 14 points. But, man, he's the grit and sandpaper. Pat Maroon just seems like the guy from the Lightning that I never thought would be gone. Corey Perry, defenseman Ian Cole. What does that bottom 6 look like now? Because if you think back, just like Colorado earlier in this conversation, they lost Cal Foote, Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, Yanni Gourde, Jan Ruda, Ryan McDonough, and Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, and here we are, right? It's funny how the fates are tied a little bit between those two teams that were facing off for a Stanley Cup not all that long ago. And of course, we're talking about Colorado and these Tampa Bay Lightning. It's going to be a different look team, John. It's just that simple. It's going to be a different era almost. I mean, obviously there are some players carrying through that we don't need to go down the list of who they are, and they are the core of the franchise. So, it's not like the Lightning are starting over by any means, but you made a great point about Pat Maroon. I didn't want to hit the button too many times with these players that nameplate.
Yeah.
Like you feel like it's always supposed to be on that one franchise jersey, and Maroon fits in as well. A lot of those pieces gone, especially from a couple seasons back, and also certainly from just a season ago. I feel like they gave up so much as well, and frankly, this more than any other moment in our coverage today, I'm almost not sure what to say. You finished your notes, John, by asking the question: is everything we've talked about enough to help shore up things around Stamkos and Kucherov?
Right.
I can't say yes. I can't. Now listen, I also am the fool that said the Boston Bruins wouldn't make the playoffs this past year. So who am I to say? By no means am I an expert. Tampa Bay may go crazy and be the team that we know them to be, just with new pieces around Stammer and Kucherov. But it doesn't feel that way to me. Maybe that's a bit of a fool's errand to base it on a feeling, but call me crazy. It's a lot of change in a short period of time. I think the Lightning, kind of like the Rangers, we're asking the same question in my mind, John. Have they reached that point where the top of the mountain has been reached and we're now just starting to tiptoe down the other side?
Yeah, because I do like Connor Sheary as far as it for 37 points in 82 games played. He's a good addition, but he's an addition amongst all the other subtractions. And I do just want to give leverage to this point because I think we have to do this for the radio sake of it. That ridiculous trade for the 26-year-old Tanner Jeannot. And I'm not saying he's not good, but this is what Nashville got. Defenseman Kel Foote, a third, fourth, and fifth that was exercised this year, a second in 2024, and a conditional first in 2025. Well, Tanner Jeannot still needs a contract for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I feel simply that Tampa has to sign him because they gave up so much.
100%. 100% right. That is, I don't know. I don't want to say that Tampa Bay painted themselves into a corner with that. I think they're still going to get some return on their investment, but man, oh man, was that an investment.
So let's close with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and what we wouldn't be doing a hockey show, Cooper, if we didn't talk about the Maple Leafs. But it's been quite an off season because we know about Brad Treliving. You go ahead and you lose Nolan Chari, Michael Bunting, Kerfoot, Hall, Gustafsson, Schenn. All those moves that were made at the deadline are pretty much all gone. They do get David Kampf as he comes back 4 years, $9.6 million, 2.4 for 2027, 27 points, a +6. They do get John Klingberg. I'm not a fan of John Klingberg. I've been on that record, -25. You say plus minus doesn't matter for some of you. Well, it matters on defense when you're constantly giving up goals in the back of your net. Toronto doesn't need more offense, and that's all he provides. But I do love Max Domi. 1 year's $3 million. He goes back home to where Dad played on that side. 28, 80 games played, 56 points. He's got a grit and sandpaper game and can also score. And boy, oh boy, from the non-vaccination process, again, I know you don't have to worry about COVID-19 anymore on that side for the Toronto parts of it, but the Red Wing and Tyler Bertuzzi goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm not going to look forward to playing against him in the Atlantic Division, but 1 year's $5.5. It seems like a $5 million signing bonus, and the rest is just money. And then also, again, 30 points in 50 games. He's often injured, but if he's there, that brings in the sandpaper and the goal scoring, but Ryan Reeves as well. This is quite an offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and dare I say it, in between Domi and Bertuzzi especially, I feel like Toronto is going to get out of that second round. I really like those additions, but they do have to get Ilya Samsonov signed.
Brad Treliving, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Brad Treliving's world. Of all the losses that the Calgary Flames had, and we're talking about all these player moves, you know what? Losing a general manager like Brad Treliving, that stung. That stung as a Calgary Flames fan. And now he's making moves. And listen, He was immediately questioned. Of course, the pressure is immense in Toronto. Arguably, it's the highest of any franchise anywhere. But I love what he's done so far. With the exception of Klingberg, again, he's a defenseman, I guess. He plays defense, but doesn't. He's a hockey player. Sometimes he scores. Sometimes he gets an assist. Rarely does he ever make a defensive stop. So great, he's the Toronto Maple Leaf. But I absolutely love, as do you, the Max Domi signing. Of course, there's nostalgia there, but I think he can be a real impact player. I mean, let's not forget, still relatively youthful, pretty healthy, and balanced in terms of goal scoring and his assists, 20-36 for the 56 points. John, you've touched on Bertuzzi. I think that's a nice sandpaper ad, just to echo what you mentioned. And I'm sure you're about to get this too with Ryan Reeves, talking about culture and grit and showing that his team is not going to be pushed around. That's what Ryan Reeves can do. This is going to be an interesting season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Expectations will be high as always. I am with you. I think they can meet and exceed those expectations.
Yeah, because you talk about some of the pieces that they lost, but when you bring in Reeves, Domi, and Bertuzzi on that, and I think you automatically replaced all of that. And look how much, again, you could talk about whether you believe in this or not for Ryan Reeves. He kind of transformed that locker room for the Minnesota Wild to get them some belief, and that's exactly what Toronto needs. They thought they had that in Ryan O'Reilly. I was honestly surprised that he was gone because I thought he did a great job there at that time, but I love the moves that Brad Treliving made, but what else is new? I also feel like I say that a lot. The last team was the Vancouver Canucks. You got Teddy Blueger, you got Ian Cole. On that side, it's very important that they signed Niels Höglander. They got him re-signed with the AHL time for a little bit before he comes back up if he stays healthy. But as long as you have Elias Pettersson and Thatcher Demko, you got a chance. So hopefully I kept everything timely here. If you want to bounce out right now again, Cooper, you can if you want to, but I did just want to give you the same question as last year. We have the standings in front of us. We can do it between the East and the West. Let's start with the East. Give me one team that made the playoffs that you don't think will this year, and one team that didn't that you think can make a push.
All right. Well, last thing I'll say before we get to the predictions is, first of all, again, great job, John. The notes are fantastic. Made this show possible. And I will say, Carson Soucy, congrats to him. It's tough that he's now going to be a Vancouver Canuck. I think he'll do real well there. Of course, leaving the Kraken. They got to sign Pettersson. That is a priority. Or otherwise, that team looks a lot different. Yeah. So now to get to your question, basically, I was just stalling, John. I was finding myself some time. So I left my butt hanging in the wind last year with my Bruins prediction, which is I keep raking myself over the coals for that one, but. All right, let's get down to it. So the Bruins, of course, historic season. The Maple Leafs, as you did with an exclamation point, hey, they won a series. They finally won a series. I'm looking at the Atlantic. I'm looking at the Metropolitan. Thinking about who missed the playoffs and who did we say, John? We said, well, okay, are these one or both of these teams out of the question for the playoffs? And I'm saying not only are they in the discussion, they are getting back in. Alec, this one's for you, my friend. The Pittsburgh Penguins return to the playoffs. I know that's not the boldest, prediction in the world, but I think they will return into the playoff picture. And I think, John, that one team that may fall out of that playoff picture, look out, ladies and gentlemen, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Man, oh man, because I'm kind of wondering that myself. I'm thinking that at the Atlantic, I think Boston's going to hang on just enough. Toronto is not going anywhere. They're going to stay cemented in that top two. My only question is I went 2 for 2 last year in the East. I went 0 for 2 in the West, and I might go 0 for all the way across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and say this. I don't think the Red Wings get in. Let me see who gets in and who loses it. I'm going to agree with you, Cooper. I'm going to say Tampa just misses out, and I will slide whether Buffalo or Ottawa. I think Ottawa's got to get off to a really great start. They got a lot of pressure on them. I'm going to take a shot in the dark, and I'm going to go with the Sens.
I like that. That's a tough one to argue against. I can see why you were oscillating back and forth with the Sabres, but I actually like the Senators pick. And gosh, even now I hear my own voice echoing in my skull. It's hard to believe that I just made that Tampa Bay prediction. And hey, I might be embarrassed again. At least I know I can't be as embarrassed as I was with the Boston Bruins, who were the best regular season team ever in the history of hockey. So I think we're in a pretty good spot with that. So, okay. Say it again so I can lock it in my head. I picked the Penguins to get back in with the Lightning dropping out.
Yep.
And you like the
I'll take
Senators to make it. And who's dropping out?
The Lightning.
The Lightning. Yes. Okay. So we agree on that one. Now, John, oh boy, am I going to be a real homer and pick as we move to the Western Conference? Will I blindly pick the Flames to make it back in? Let's see. Actually, you know what? Do you want to know? You did all the hard work. I'll go so you can close out the show with your predictions. All right. So I'm taking a peek at this right here, and this is going to be a very easy one. This is too easy, but I have to do it, or otherwise I just would feel foolish. The Winnipeg Jets fall out of the playoff picture. That I'm going with an easy one there. All right. Now, who's going to make it, John? Who's going to make it? I'm not going to say the Calgary Flames, John. I'm going to say, against everything in my body, I feel sick to my stomach. I think that the Vancouver Canucks will find a way to make the playoffs this upcoming season.
We both had them as dark horse last year to kind of make it. We're both kind of on that same trajectory. Quickly, just on the East in between that, because I know we touched on it. I find it very difficult between Florida and Tampa. That's where I was flip-flopping. I'm just going to admit that to you. I don't know on that side because of the injuries. But for the West, who makes it and who drops out? Man, this is very borderline because, again, we can't argue Colorado, Dallas. You could argue maybe Minnesota. Maybe they could fall out. Who knows? Maybe with the Jets, with the trades with Scheifele and Hellebuck, that might happen. And again, I'm not stalling. I'm just trying to go ahead and give you some thoughts here. But I think Nashville can get in. They're a very borderline team, and things will have to work out. So that's a shot in the dark. But a team that I don't like the losses of, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I never thought I would. The Los Angeles Kings can miss the playoffs.
Yeah, you know what? I think that you might be onto something, John. I was, frankly, a little afraid to go. And listen, I wouldn't say that you're even, closing your eyes and swinging for the fences. I think that is a pretty informed prediction. It's going to be a different look team. Those losses are significant. I expect them to be significant in terms of wins and losses for the team. Sorry, let's make it official again. I'm saying, of course, I took the low-hanging fruit here. Fairly obvious, and we'll see. Maybe they prove me wrong, but I think it's an easy pick to say the Jets fall out, and Canucks make it in. You like the Kings to fall out, and you think the Preds make it back in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to lock those in. I don't feel too confident with any of my ones this year. I'm just going to be full honest.
Neither do I. Especially the Canucks. I can't believe I said it. One of the Flames' primary rivals. But you know what? I'm trying not to be just a homer completely. So I'll give them some credit if they can. I think if Susie can contribute on the blue line, Pettersson can continue to grow, and they were just too inconsistent. It was just too mercurial, up and down. I think a few more, just even short winning streaks, and I think that they turned some losses into wins. Just enough to sneak into the wild card.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent on their team, and I completely agree with you. So here's the thing. We're closing up shop. And again, thank you for everyone that's joined in on this side. Again, it'll be posted on Spotify later and all that too. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Cooper. I just want to throw this out there. So opening night officially 87 days away. So the NHL season is going to start on Tuesday, October 10th. That's going to be the opener between Seattle and Vegas. Again, if Cooper's available or Alec's available, we'll get that stuff done on Tuesday. Cooper, I'm not putting any pressure on you for the Flame season opener, but I figured that'd be the one that we would start with at the Saddledome for Winnipeg and Calgary on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. On Thursday, I will start the season with the Red Wings and the New Jersey Devils at 7. And that'll be the look as far as our coverage. And then the very small announcement, the NHL 24 beta will launch late August. Sign-up window will be late July on this end, so just a couple weeks away. If you guys have a PS5 or an Xbox Series console, I'd like to play with you. I'm actually pretty good at that one. We can get some things done. Let's get that squared away and get information sent across if you want to. But our coverage is going to start pretty soon with the season opener, my friend. I hope that we can do that one.
Yeah, first of all, Alec, tip of the cap to you. Thanks for hanging with us as always. And it's been fun reading your tweets lately. I love getting your hockey thoughts, even through the off season. Love all your opinions, my friend. And John, yes, absolutely. Boy, it's hard to believe we're less than 3 months out from yet another NHL season. And maybe if we cover the Flames opener this time, John, and they happen to win, which they hadn't, they had lost their their season opener. I think it was like 7 or maybe even 9 seasons in a row or something crazy. They win big against the Avalanche, the defending Stanley Cup champions. They go on, I think it was a 5 or 6 game winning streak, and then who knew that would be the peak of the season? Maybe things would be a little different. Note that I did not pick them to return to the playoffs, so my expectations are low. But that doesn't mean I'm not excited to cover some games, starting with those openers. Lots to look forward to. This was a lot of fun. Great work, truly, my friend. You know what you're talking about. You are totally prepared. You got everything in front of you, including some NHL 24. And I'm not surprised to hear that you kick ass playing Chell, my friend. I have no doubt that you are torching 14-year-olds online right playing Chell.
It was a long time. We speak good with the group that we had. I'd like to play with some people that I know. So if you guys do have that, you want to play some games, we'll definitely get that signed up, and I will be contacting you shortly on that end. But I'm looking forward to covering the season. This was a lot of fun to do. Thank you guys for sticking around, and I hope that I kept it timely, my friend.
This was a great one, John. You absolutely did. Thanks for all your hard work and your coverage. Alec, again, salute to you. And we'll be back, I'm sure, very soon. More hockey coverage coming in the near future. Thanks, John.
Sounds good, gentlemen. We'll talk to you.
Adios.